Hello, everybody. My name is Gail Dines, and welcome to another in the series of Culture Reframe's Facebook Live. Thank you for joining us. So this is one of many of our Facebook Lives, and you can find them archived on our Facebook page. Please, for those of you who are here, put into the comments who you are and where you're from. Now, and also questions, of course. So it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our guest today. Sharon and Chelsea Maxwell began their collaboration 6 years ago, bringing presentations, workshop, and curricula to schools and organizations throughout the United States and Mexico. Their work brings together the perspectives and insights of an educator and a psychologist. They lecture on the topic of sexual health and responsibility, supporting parents in communicating their values and ethics through meaningful dialogue. Additionally, they offer parents and educators practical ways to help children successfully navigate the world of media technology. So there's going to be a lot of info given in this talk about what you can actually do. Chelsea specialized in curricular development and technology and innovation at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and is now running girls' groups exploring topics such as body image, healthy relationships, and consent. Dr. Maxwell is a practicing clinical psychologist specializing in adolescent and family therapy and has been in this field for well over 35 years. So welcome, Sharon and Chelsea.
Thank you.
Hey, Gail.
It's great to see you again.
To see you as well.
And I'm really looking forward to this because you've got so many pearls of wisdom to help our viewers. So I'm going to jump right in. And the first question, obviously, that we're going to ask is, in all of your vast experience, how do you think the impact of porn and technology has shifted the way this generation now approaches sex and relationships?
It's a great question. A great question. And, you know, sometimes it pays to start by saying, imagine that you're a sex educator and you're going to schools all over the country and in Mexico, and the kinds of questions that you get. And in the questions and the stories and what you hear, and as well as in my clinical practice, you get to hear how kids are understanding sex today. And immediately you begin to see the impact of porn. A good example.
A few years ago, we were at a school in New York, and all the 7th grade boys were writing questions of, is it true that girls really like to be tied up? And it just took a second for us to realize why we were getting these questions. It was because 50 Shades of Grey, the movie, had just come out, and there were billboards all over the city, and every kid in the class had been watching clips and reading clips. And this is actually how they had been learning what is sex up until they were receiving this class. So kids are now receiving their sex ed online through porn and other forms of media.
And it falls to us because we're not doing a good job educating them. And if we don't, where else are they going to get the information? This idea that any attention is good attention is also something that comes directly from porn. If you can make $1 million, you know, being sexy online, and you see that as kind of what's become now the norm, and as well as the fact that there isn't, all kids will be seeing porn. It's a mistake to think that you can ever keep your child from seeing it. You will not know, but they will have seen porn because it's in their hand. I mean, literally, they're carrying porn in their hands, or the hands of their best friends, or their cousins, or some sleepover, or whoever has the most intense understanding or pictures about sex. Of course, among preteens and teens, that's the person with social power. So of course you're going to gravitate towards that person, and inevitably you're going to see porn. It's a terrible way to understand what is sex. And inevitably, I see these kids in my private practice, and they have their first sexual experience, and the response is, "That's it? That's it?" You know, they have understood nothing, but they've tried to replicate what they've seen through some porn, most intensely, which has nothing to do with female pleasure at all in any kind of intelligent way. And in fact, girls are thinking they need to look like this. Boys are thinking girls have to look like porn stars. People are designing how they approach and the way that they act based on what they're seeing in porn. That's what it means to be sexy.
I'm so glad you mentioned the word pleasure, Sharon, because for so many of us who are, arguing that pornography is not a good form of sex education and that we need to do something, they always see us as, quote, prudes or anti-sex, when we're absolutely the opposite. What we are arguing for a healthy, fun, adventurous, creative sex with female pleasure very much at the center of this, which porn, of course, completely destroys. You know, I mean, porn is women pretending to be aroused as opposed to being aroused, and most of the women hate it. So
porn is made for masturbation. So if, you know, it's not made for understanding two people engaging in sex. It's a whole different thing. So if you actually want to understand sex, you have to actually eliminate all the information you've been given from porn, because that's only made for masturbation. It's not made for sex ed.
Would I be correct in saying, I mean, I did research on a lot of the sex ed programs, and one of the things that's missing from them all is an critical analysis of porn. They're teaching sex ed layered on the pornography and the sort of templates that have been shaped by porn without first unpacking what these kids know. So I don't know if they're going to hear anything, given that they've come to these sex ed classes with a porn template set in place.
And believe me, it's hard enough to go into a school and teach sex ed if you even mention that you want to talk about porn, which is, by not mentioning it, you're eliminating the possibility that at least the older students are going to take you seriously at all. You know, then you've had your legs taken out from under you before you begin.
So much of sex ed is based on this idea of like disease prevention. That's how so many curricula are approaching sex ed. And if students are hearing one understanding of sex that's disease prevention and another one through porn, which one do you think they're going to be going to for their
Exactly. Yeah, it's all in a lot of sex ed is negative. You're going to get pregnant, you're going to get diseases, you're going to get, and in fact, what's missing from all of this is the pleasure and the joy and the intimacy of sex. Yeah. So a question we always get asked, and this is, I think, is a critical one: at what age should I start talking to my kids about pornography?
Yeah, I mean,
it's a tough one. Yeah.
We always say to start talking about sex by age 8. And you want to talk about it from a positive, you know, it's not a disease prevention. It's not, you know, it's a positive approach to talking about sex by age 8. And then being aware of where your kid's at, the information they're getting, how much access they have to media, but definitely no later than age 10 is what we talk about. Because by age 10, they're going to hear it from someone. If they are not seeing it themselves, they're hearing about it from someone.
And what we always say at Culture Reframed is, if you don't talk to your kids about porn, the porn industry will.
Yeah, and when they hear about it, when they see it, you want them to, at age 10, they're still going to come to you. If they know that it's not something they have to be like scared to talk to you about, but you can talk to them about it in an open way. You can say, oh, if your friends talk about this, come to me, because I'm going to be your source of real information. Exactly. And so if you can get that open dialogue at age 10, then you have a chance of them actually listening. Because once you get later, once they reach the teen age, they don't want to hear from you anymore.
The thing to ask yourself as a parent is, if you don't want to talk to your kids about porn, do you think that if you don't talk to them, they're not going to see it? Exactly. Do you think that actually not talking is going to make them not see it? Because that's just a fantasy. And we want to live in a fantasy about what our kids are seeing, but it doesn't service them to be living in that fantasy world.
No, completely. But then we get into the issue of, a lot of parents don't feel equipped to talk about pornography, which is very complicated, some because of their own histories. In many cases, it's often women who come to these talks and they don't want to address the issue that their male partners might be using porn, or they feel uncomfortable. And I just want to say, at Culture Reframed, as you well know, because you were consultants for us, we developed programs for parents of tweens and of teens, which helps parents. It educates them how to talk to their kids about porn, and we even have, which you wrote, educate scripts on how to talk to your kids. So if Mandy's on, Mandy, can you put in the URL to Culture Reframed into the parents program, please? So, what do you? I mean, given that we've created the parents program, but really that's not going to, you know, I mean, we've got parents using it. What would you say to parents who say, look, I know I need to speak to my kids about porn. I just don't feel like I can do it. It's too embarrassing. My kid doesn't want to talk to me. They won't listen. What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many pieces to that. I think, first of all, I mean, research shows that talking to your kids about sex in general, anything you say will delay sexual activity. You don't have to have the perfect words. And the same applies to porn. You don't have to have everything perfect. Just the fact that you're starting that conversation, you're making yourself a resource, you're already helping so much.
And you can also say, nobody talked to me about this. I mean, Chelsea did some wonderful documentary about, what do I wished I'd known? What do I wish someone had told me when I was in middle school, right? And that's what people want. People just wanted someone to be open and honest with them about what it is. You don't have to have the perfect words. You just have to start a dialogue so that when they see something and it makes them very anxious or what is this, they know that they can go to you. Should there ever be something that we can't discuss with our children? And what is the impact of having an entire domain that we can't talk about? I understand how uptight parents are. It's very understandable. And you can even say that to kids. No one talked to me, but I wished someone had, because I got some really wrong information and I don't want you to
better.
have that.
Yeah, I want to do better.
And I know it's embarrassing, but I want to do better. Yeah.
And I think to be mindful often that your kid would rather be anywhere else in the world than sitting across the table talking to you about porn.
Yeah.
Which means that, as parents, we have to be very mindful of how we speak to our kids. And that's, I think we've built that into the parents program, is how actually to be mindful about that. And really the most important thing is getting your kid to hear what you have to say and having a dialogue where you don't just lecture. It's
a bunch of little conversations. It's not, one sit down talk. But just a bunch of little conversation starters that you can, I did this Facebook Q&A lecture today and I heard this. What do you think about that? I really was surprised by this information, and just ways to kind of get them to start talking to you and sharing some of your values, but not in a lecture one-way conversation.
I heard the best when I was at a conference. They said, don't have 100-minute conversations, have 101-minute conversations.
Exactly.
Our kids do not want to be lectured to for 100 minutes, right? And they're not going to sit there for that. So and I think there's so many teachable moments. You go past a billboard, you see something on TV, and you can have a 1-minute conversation and then move on, rather than giving a major lecture.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting questions I get, and it's very hard to answer, but I always get after I've talked about how hardcore mainstream porn is, which a lot of parents don't get, that what their kids are getting to in 5 seconds, if I get to in 10 seconds, they're getting to in 5 seconds for free, is hardcore, really hardcore. There's virtually no softcore porn left that's for free on the internet. So after they hear this, I get this question, and I'd love to hear your answer. So they say, they're often devastated after they know the parents what's on in mainstream porn, and they say, well, do you think I should give him a Playboy so he stays away from hardcore porn? What do you answer to that?
Kids are used to looking at screens at this point. If you give them something, they're not then going to Google it online. So just the fact that they're looking at Playboy doesn't mean they're not going to go online. If anything, it's just going to prompt them to go online. Yeah.
And you don't know what you're igniting either. I mean, it's a dangerous game.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a tough question. I can understand parents' confusion about that. But porn tells you what is supposed to turn you on. Porn is telling you what sex is supposed to be like, and through a very slanted and often incredibly demeaning kind of way in terms of two people. Every human being has the potential to know what pleasures them on their own. We all are capable of finding out what fantasies we have and what parts of our body want to be touched and explored. There's no reason why you have to be programmed to think about sex in a particular way. What you're telling your kids is that you have the freedom to explore your own body and explore what pleasures you. You don't need someone telling you that. As a matter of fact, if someone does tell you that, now you're thinking you're supposed to have sex this way, and it has nothing to do with an awareness of your own body and your own pleasure. We're very imaginative people. We can figure out how to masturbate and how to pleasure ourselves in a million ways without someone instructing us as to how to do it in a way that's demeaning.
And why would you want a bunch of creepy men in LA, the porn industry, being the ones to educate your kid about sex? You wouldn't want them anywhere near them. let alone that they become the teachers.
So much more than sex, though, Gail, too. It's how you're supposed to look, how you're supposed to dress, how you're supposed to act. There's all kinds of racial stereotypes that are being fed you in porn. There's so many different ways. There's so many issues having to do with intimacy or lack of intimacy. Of no means yes, and you have to keep pursuing, and condoms are not pleasurable, and on and on and on. All the messages that kids are getting from watching porn that I end up hearing them talking about, in my private practice, or we get questions about it in our sex ed curriculum. And it's appalling because they'd be far better off on their own, without all of that information.
Well, what's interesting, just to give you, people listening, the power of pornography is there was an interesting study done by a team of researchers that I can't remember exactly which journal it was published in, but it's on our website. And they interviewed incoming freshmen men, and they asked them, what is the one sex act you'd really love to do? And there was three that were sort of vying for first position. The first position, without doubt, was I want to come on a girl's face. The second one was a threesome, and the third one was anal. Now, what's interesting, when the researchers said, why do you want to come on a girl's face? What the guy said at first was, well, I'm up here and she's down there and I have a sense of power. But then when the researcher really dug in, what really came out was actually quite devastating. They said, the young men, the first year students, they said, well, I know she hates it and that turns me on. So that's the power of pornography, because I don't believe that men are born like that. Okay, boys and men are not born like that. And I think when we say boys will be boys, we so lower the bar. And in a way, that's a man-hating, boy-hating view, that we expect nothing better from boys than to get to pornography.
And boys want to know what they're supposed to do. And they're under a tremendous amount of pressure to do whatever they're supposed to do right. And they don't know what they're supposed to do. And the number of boys that I've had that have told me, what they're doing sexually, and as if that's supposed to be pleasuring a girl. And I'm like, where did you get this information? Why are you thinking this is a good idea? And it's like all of it. And they've been wanting so badly to just get information, and they're getting it all from porn and not realizing why things aren't working well. We can take this back. Parents can take back, humans can take back, figuring this out on their own without being fed a bunch of merchandising about sex.
Because what porn is, it's the commodification, industrialization, and monetization of women's bodies, and it's taking a very human desire and handing you back in ways that look nothing like that. And I always say porn is to sex what McDonald's is to food, and the industrialization of a very human desire. So one of the things parents say is, my kids really don't want to talk about it. They're avoiding it. What suggestions would you give for parents to do this?
Yeah, I always talk about because we're mother-daughter, and I had a mother growing up who talked about sex, and I was mortified every time she'd sit down and have a conversation with me. Your kids, especially as they're getting into their teenage years, it's like a biological mandate that they don't want to talk to you about this. It's how they're showing that they're separating. It's how
I love that idea of biological mandate.
Yeah, it's like asserting their independence and that they're separate from you. However, you're talking about sex, they're listening. And so sometimes it means getting in the car with no devices, driving and just having a conversation if that's what it needs to be. But also sharing, like Sharon said, that you can say, I want to do better for you than my parents did for me. And this is why I know this feels awkward, but I need to have this conversation with you. And that's the best way to, I think, approach some of these conversations and really get them at least listening with a little bit of compassion that you're trying to do the best that you can as a parent. Most of my friends ended up getting their sex ed from me, then share, oh my God, you won't believe what my mom told me last night. But because when it's sex, they're listening, whether or not they're acting like they want to be.
It's true. I also think that there's a moment, this comes up all the time with parents. One thing I think of often is to what is your job as a parent, and to literally say to them at the end of the day, I have to look in the mirror and know I've done the best job as your parent that I can do. And this means having this conversation with you, like it or not. And I don't answer to you, and I don't answer to anybody else or all your friends' parents or whatever. I answer to myself. At the end of the day, I'm going to give you the information that I think you need to know. And I'm sorry if it's uncomfortable, but I'm doing my job, period, you know? And just...
Sorry, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's...
Okay, so one of the things I found that's muddied the waters is this kind of I think, porn industry argument that there's such a thing as ethical porn or feminist porn. And I've spent a lot of time looking at this stuff, and it's just another niche market as far as I can see. They might use women who don't look, you know, like the perfect porn model, but in a way, you're still talking about the commodification and monetization of bodies. And so what does it mean that, you know, people are arguing this ethical or feminist porn when we say we're not stepping back and saying, what does it mean to commodify human bodies and sex? Isn't sex something that should be out of the capitalist market?
Well, you're bringing up a huge issue, Gail. And yes, I mean, I think where I stand most on that is that, you know, when you are objectifying, when you're teaching someone to objectify their own body, that's part of how you survive in this world, is to objectify yourself and put yourself on display. I mean, that is the effect of the internet. Everything is performance now, and everything is presentation. What is authentic and what is private has been blasted open, and so that kids don't even have an idea of that. So, you know, you have to, these are conversations that we have when we talk to parents about the internet. You have to take a stand on what is private and what is not, on whether you want intimacy and whether you want privacy. All those ideas are so open now. Kids spend an enormous amount of time making a presentation of themselves for their online reality, right? Exactly. And part of that presentation is their sexual presentation of themselves. But when you're spending more time creating that, then you are actually engaging with any kind of meaningful, authentic relationship. You're in danger of losing yourself, you know, and losing any understanding of who you are. So, you know, wherever you stand on all of these issues, go back to the core of what is private, what is personal, you know, and what is intimate, what is intimacy. And, you know, everyone doesn't have to agree. We don't have to have everyone agree, but these are, if you're a parent, you need to be having this conversation about where you stand, you know, because the culture isn't, if you do have a sense of privacy and intimacy, the culture isn't standing with you right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've got some interesting things like saying kids create themselves as a brand, sexual objectification is directly linked with violence against women. And I think all of those we know from the empirical research. And also, when a girl self-objectifies, it causes a whole other slew of problems, from eating disorders to self-harming, to anxiety, to depression. And what concerns me, you know, in the I think it was the 70s, Irving Goffman, the sociologist, wrote a book called The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. God, he must be turning in his grave now, looking at what it's like now. Is this whole notion of you create an image of yourself, you brand yourself, as someone said here, as Gemma said here in the, and then sort of in all of this question is what happens to the sense of being human in a culture where your job is to be visible. And how are you visible? You document everything. That really, to be visible is to be documented, pictured. So I want to lead us into another very troubling area of sexting. So I've recently been to some conferences of academics who are talking about sexting, and very, very troubling. So some of the academics in the field are arguing about how we need to teach teen girls to sex safely. And that kind of blows my head. How on earth? Firstly, it's illegal, right? The legality isn't discussed in that. And secondly, how impossible, once you press send on that image, it's gone. And what's never brought up in these conferences is, why are boys asking girls to sext? Because a lot of it's bullying and sexual harassment.
In any conversation, it always needs to start with talking to kids about not asking for sex. We shouldn't be first addressing not sending them. We need to be starting with who's asking for them. To just expect that, again, that's expecting boys will be boys. They'll ask them, not holding them to any standards that they can fulfill, you know? So we need to be starting there, talking about both the legal aspects, the ethical aspects of not asking for a sext.
And I wish the researchers that were talking would have a teenage girl, preteen girl in their private practice talking about the hellfire that comes down on them in a situation like this, and what it feels like to know that picture now, a lot of boys are looking at them differently, that they're now, the girls won't talk to them, that, it just goes on and on and on. We're acting as if this is just, oh, everyone's doing it, it's all just so fine. First of all, a 15-year-old girl doesn't have any awareness of the cultural environment that she's doing this in, how it's being used. She just wants to make somebody happy. That has been probably, and I'm talking even about just slightly older teenage boys, grooming her to do this, like, oh, please, da 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 da, and it's 2 a.m. and she's feeling a little excited, and why not? And then all hell breaks loose.
And it's teaching her how to objectify herself. And the real thing is, instead, why not be talking to her about what is going to bring her pleasure? Why is it all about how to objectify herself for someone else's pleasure, instead of what actually brings you pleasure? And how
what came out in this, seminar that I was listening. They said one of the parents said, I think my 15-year-old daughter doesn't want to sext, or she's not sure. And these are experts in the field, academics, and they said, well, why doesn't she put on a bikini if she feels more comfortable? I mean, what messages are we sending to our daughters that your job is to be a sex object, disposable one, because when he gets that, he's done with you, by the way, and he's on to another one and another one and another one. So I'm listening to, I've got one foot in the academic world and one foot in listening to you and the piece. How is this clash happening that the academics are so out of touch with the reality of the lives of young girls?
I mean, it's you can take anything academically and make it into a sociological. I mean, this is your field, Gail. This is what you know how people do that. You know how you can take an idea and then run with it into some big, this is just what's happening culturally. And, adults are doing it that are in relationship, that are in long distance relationships. So why shouldn't teenagers be able to? And why are we taking away their, all of that, but it's objectification is objectification. And you can't go, it goes along with consent and everything else. Yeah,
there's a great comment here that says gender stereotypes teach girls that the needs of others are her responsibility and more important than her own. Yeah. And I think that's really getting at the point. And I was just teaching a sex ed class to a group of girls, and we were talking about consent with all different forms of physical touch. And they said, well, if you said no, wouldn't that hurt the other person's feelings? And it was just like, that's the conversation we need to be having with girls. We are from such young ages teaching them that it's their responsibility to make other people happy, and not teaching them how to know themselves and what makes them happy, and to put that respect that first. And then you can talk about communicating with kindness and all of that. And we need to be talking to girls, not just saying these words, but actually sitting down and saying, so what would you say in this situation? Yeah. Here's a scenario. And this is what we do when we're working with students, is we use different scenarios, because that helps them actually see, what does this look like in reality? Because
how can a parent do that? So give some tips to parents who are listening who don't know what to do.
I think your example of TV shows is great. Like, you see a scene where something's happening, and you pause it and you say, what's happening here? What do you think this person should say? What should they? And they're going to roll their eyes and be like, do you have to ruin every show? Do you have to ruin every movie? And you just keep going with it. Like, what could this person say? To talk about it, it's so much easier to talk about a TV show or a scenario that you heard in a conversation or a book than talking to them about what they should do. So I would always approach it in that way.
Okay, I think there's something that we need to address there, because she says, there's a woman who says, I feel this is bordering closely on the edge of shaming these girls by saying that objectification is all there is. What if exhibitionism and wanting to be seen is a real desire for them, male or female? And I don't think we're shaming these girls at all. I think what we're doing is trying to help these girls navigate a very complex new world of a porn culture, sexting, all the things that our generation certainly didn't have to navigate. So certainly don't hear you shaming in any way the girls. What you're doing is trying to provide supportive mechanisms for parents and for kids to deal with this.
And I understand what she's saying. I have had enough young women in my private practice to know that it's not. There are desires to want to be seen, and there are girls that are more wanting, to be as sexy as they can be and show this off and all of that. And it's never about shaming those instincts. If that's, it's always about just asking, so how does that feel? What is that feel? Is that a good thing? How does that go? Now, often you see that they've bought into this idea that this is what they're supposed to do. And you have to be very subtle to distinguish between that and, hey, I'm just playing. I'm just having a good time, and like, okay, all right, but also understand the context that you're playing in. Mm-hmm. Understand how this is, because they're young. They don't understand the entire world that they're doing this in, or what the implications can be. Never, ever, ever shame. I want to take your point seriously, because it's very wrong to shame a girl anyway, and it's so important to just really get her to talk about what it's about for her. What does that mean to her? And
also do we want to be spending our time teaching girls how to sext, or teaching them how to find what's pleasurable for them?
Exactly.
That's what it comes down to for me. Why are we teaching them how to sext when the majority of girls don't even know what brings them pleasure? Haven't really had anyone talking to them about what's female pleasure is about.
And it's a world where male pleasure is the centered, not female pleasure.
Exactly. It's a very quick and fast line between won't that hurt his feelings and, oh no, I don't use condoms because he tells me it's not, that doesn't feel good, to him. And I'm more special to him if I don't make him use a condom. That kind of not wanting to hurt feelings all the way to having unsafe and unprotected sex, is all about pleasing and pleasuring, and you're there for that job.
So I'm asking, if parents are on and you've got specific questions to ask, please do, because we're going to be wrapping up in a minute. So if you had to leave parents with some tips, and I know this is so complex, we all wish we had 10 tips we could give them that would deal with this. But what would you say of all the work you've done are the most important things that you can say to parents at this?
I think the first thing is opening up a conversation. Just your children knowing that you are a resource for them when they come to you, not reacting with any sense of, oh my God, where did you see that? Oh my God, what is that? Oh, I'm going to take away your phone now because you're telling me about this. But having you be someone who they feel like they can go to for information, and starting that conversation is definitely number one.
Yeah. That's number one and number two. And the other thing is of course you're not going to do this well. So get over that right away. It's going to be hard. It's going to be ridiculous. And it's, of course you're going to stumble, and you're going to say, I don't feel like you can just say your truth as you're knowing it. And if part of that truth is, God, I don't really know quite how to say all of this, so I'm going to just go, but I know I need to be talking to you about this, then fine. And also you can also be lighthearted. It's like, oh, we're both going to be so embarrassed now. It's okay. We're going to get through this, I'm sure, kind of thing. And I think, Chelsea's perspective too, understand that they have to act as if you're torturing them. They have to act that way. And they will hear every word you say. It will matter to them, because you're one of the few sources that are going to give them information that's not coming from the internet or from their friends who are just as stupid as they are. So, it matters to know that nobody knows how to do this well. And even when you do it as best you can, you're still going to get, a daughter who rolls her eyes and says, please God, stop talking. And, you do it anyway, because it's your job.
Well, and there's a question is, how do you start the conversation with a 3-year-old who's not yet aware of sex or porn? You don't talk about sex.
Eight-year-olds. Eight-year-olds.
Is it 8?
Yeah.
8-year-old.
So I mean, I would say this and tell me what you think, that you don't talk about sex and porn. You talk about, I mean, I know with my son, what I would talk about was his beautiful body and how his penis and his heart and his head was all part of this wonderful body, and he never made a decision about his penis without his head and his heart. And also teach, I found one of the most effective ways for boys and for girls, of course, is that you make feminism their first language, so that they get a sense of who they are in the world. And we do that for boys as well, because boys are getting a bad rap here as well. It's not like this is great for them. So, and I want to also suggest that for people listening, parents, we go on the Culture Reframed website, look at the programs are free and they are available. And also, I know that the Maxwells are available to do courses, classes in schools. So if you're interested in really robust sex education, which really tackles the issues, I mean, because there's very few people who have the courage to speak like you two do. I mean, you say it what it is, you address the issues, you don't skirt them, and you've got all these years of experience, and the way you both come at it together is so fantastic. So is there anything you'd like to say in closing remarks?
Just don't let your fear get in the way. Just, hop in there and do it. It's the last great gift you can give your child, is to open up this conversation about something that's going to be part of their lives for the rest of their lives, and how they learn about it matters. Think back about how you learned about it and what you wished you had known, and just plow ahead. It's okay if you do it badly, because they'll know you care, and they'll listen. They will hear what you say. Teenagers are supposed to be alienated anyway. For this parent who wonders how they cannot alienate their child, they're going to be alienated anyway. Don't worry about that. It's going to be fine.
Yeah. Okay. And our website is maxwell.com if you want to learn more about it.
It's well worth going on. And as I say, if your school is not doing this, then march into the principal's office and tell them you want the Maxwells to come in and to educate the school, because you were not doing our kids any favors by not doing this at all. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time tonight. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I learn so much from you every time we speak. So thank you everyone for viewing, watching. This has been taped. It will be on our Facebook page in probably a day or two, so you can pass it along. And until the next time, take care, everybody, and stay healthy.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.